Now, I don't know if you can see this, but this is the absolute messiest this place has been since I've gotten here, but for good reason. I've been super busy over the past couple of weeks shooting some commercials. That's why you haven't really seen much of me here on the channel. But along the way, doing those shoots, I've learned a couple things that I want to show you that I think you'll find cool. This video is sponsored by Storyblocks, and all of the footage we're going to be shooting for this tutorial will be available for download on Storyblocks if you go to the link in the description. So make sure you do that, and in the meantime, I'm going to clean this place up so that we can start shooting this video. These right here are banana chips, also called nanners, and they're going to be the subject for our video. And if we're going to be shooting with banana chips, then we're also going to need some real bananas. Now, one of the cool things about editing is that there are endless variations and ways to do things, and it's entirely situational depending on the video you're making. For example, I just made this ad for Cheetos, and I was able to use the 9:16 aspect ratio to my advantage by having the bag fill up the entirety of the frame, hiding the background, making that cut between the two shots and that transition much easier. Now, on the other hand, with this old Cheerios spec ad that I made, while it's a similar effect, the video is 16:9, so I couldn't hide the background behind the box. I had to come up with another way to blend the two shots. Now in this case, for today's banana chip example, I'm going to be using a different technique from both of those videos to achieve a similar effect. All right, so here we are in Final Cut Pro X. This is what I use to edit all of my videos, but if you don't use Final Cut, don't worry, you can still apply all of these steps to any editor of your choice. I'm going to start by bringing in our bag spin here to the timeline. I'm going to remove any volume because we don't need it. And because this clip is almost 25 seconds long, we're going to have to speed it up a little bit. So as the bag comes around here and we see the front of it, I'm going to create a speed ramp by hitting Shift B on my keyboard, and I'm going to speed up the beginning portion by about 5,000%. Looking much better, but I'm also going to speed up this second portion here to 200%, and I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. Now, before we continue, I do want to remind you that if you would like to follow along for this tutorial, you can actually download these clips at Storyblocks by going to the link in the description or going to storyblocks.com/Daniel Schiffer. Storyblocks is an online subscription service packed with incredible assets for all your video needs. Stock footage, motion backgrounds, After Effects templates, overlays. With a membership plan, you get unlimited downloads of high-quality royalty-free content to take those videos to the next level. The best part is that you can use these assets for literally anything you want, whether that's personal or client projects. So if you're interested, then go to the link in the description below or go to storyblocks.com/Daniel Schiffer to learn more. Now, if we scrub back to the start of our clip here, you can actually see that the background isn't fully filling the frame. So what I'm going to do is go to View and bring in our horizon, and I'm going to scale in by about 10%. So that's 110% scale, but also at the end of the clip here, I want to make sure that the bag in the shot is nice and centered. So I'm going to nudge up our Y position to about 100. And I'm also just going to slightly nudge the bag over to the right. This is before and this is now. The bag is a little bit more front and center, which I like. So I'm going to hit done and remove our horizon. All right, so our next step for the start of this transition is to create a freeze frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my playhead here and scrub through. And right about here where we see the front of the label, I'm going to select the clip and then go up to here and select this option which says hold. This red portion you see here is our freeze frame, and I'm going to extend it so that it lasts to about the 4-second mark of our project, and I'm going to create a cut and delete the excess. Now I'm going to zoom in here and scrub through, and right at the point where this freeze frame begins, I'm going to select the clip and create a cut so that we have two separate clips, one where the bag is spinning and then one which is just the freeze frame. From here we can start creating our mask, so I'm going to go into my effects down here and type in draw mask and drag that onto our freeze frame, and I'm going to zoom in to about 50%, and I'm just going to start drawing a mask in my desired shape. So I'm going to trace the elephant here through the rest of the bag here, and then just tracing around the edge. Now we need to grab our playhead and go back to the beginning frame of our freeze frame, and we're going to set keyframes on our scale, our rotation, as well as our position, and I'm going to scrub through another 10 or 11 frames and set more keyframes. From here, I'm going to scale up this half of our bag a whole bunch to about 175%. I'm also going to rotate it about 9 degrees, and then I'm going to push up on the Y position until it is just out of the top of the frame. Gonna bring our playhead back to the beginning of our freeze frame here, and now I'm gonna select Option on my keyboard and click and drag on our freeze frame down to duplicate it. And now what we wanna do is adjust our mask to create that bottom half of the bag. So I'm gonna zoom in a little bit here and select all of the control points that are up top, making sure to get all of these, but not touching the ones around the bottom edge and around our elephant. And I'm going to delete those control points. Next, I'm going to create some new control points by right-clicking on our mask here and hitting Add Point, and then just dragging this down. I'm going to make sure that this one is set to linear. It's a little bit easier to work with. Right-click again and make another point and drag this down, setting it to linear as well. Gonna add a point in between just to get that curvature, and same thing on this side. Now, effectively what we have done is we have isolated the two halves of the bag into separate layers. This will allow us to manipulate each half of the bag separately, and as you can see here, both halves of the bag are still moving upward, and that is because the keyframes we originally applied to the top half of the bag are still applied to the bottom half of the bag as well. So to fix this, I'm gonna go into our transforms here, and I'm gonna skip ahead to our last keyframe, and making sure that this bottom clip is still selected, I'm going to change the Y position to go downward instead of upward, as well as changing our rotation to -9 instead of 9 degrees. Now you can see when we play this clip back, the two halves of the bag do in fact go in opposite directions. I like the little added effect that rotation gives. Now the next thing we want to address is the fact that our shot has no more background. Now to bring our background back in, what I'm going to do is hold Option on our keyboard and click and drag down on our bottom clip to duplicate it. And making sure that this new duplicate clip is selected, I'm going to go up here and delete the mask from our effects. As you can see, this has brought our background back, but now everything is looking a little bit funky and confusing. That is nothing to worry about. We can fix this pretty easily. Now, if I disable the background for a second, you can see that our bag is still here in its two halves. We've already dealt with the bag, so it's important to remember that the whole purpose of bringing in this background clip now is to only focus on this yellow backdrop as well as these bunches of bananas that we have going around. The bag in the background shot is not important. Now, what I'm gonna do is making sure this background clip is still selected, I'm gonna go to my transforms and click on this arrow to bring us to our secondary keyframe. You can see that this is way too large. We don't need it this big. I'm going to scale down to about 130%, and I'm also going to change our rotation to 0. We still have a little bit of this banana poking up over here, so I'm going to lower the clip a little more, but now we're missing a whole bunch of background up here, so I'm actually going to take the scale Y and stretch the clip until the background is filling the frame entirely. And that's pretty much it for the first part of this transition. So now we can go ahead and bring in the next shot, which is our flying bananas, and drag it into our timeline. Just like always, I'm gonna remove the audio out of the clip because we don't need it. And I am finding that this movement is a little bit slow for my liking. So I'm gonna hit Command R and speed this up by 200%. And next we can trim this up so that we only have the part of the clip we actually need. Next we can select our flying bananas clip and drag it underneath our two bag layers while remaining on top of our background. I'm going to drag the playhead to the part of the transition where we first see the bag split, so right there. And with our flying banana slices selected, I'm going to scale it down and move the whole clip so that the bananas are entirely hidden behind the bag. Looks pretty good at around 55%, so I am happy with this. And I'm going to set a keyframe on both the scale as well as the position. Next, what we're going to do is click through frame by frame with the right arrow key until this point here where we can see that the bottom edge is cutting off this banana slice right here. This right here is how we know this is the part of the clip where we want to scale it back up to 100% and bring the Y position back to 0 as well. And if we bring this back and click through slowly, you can see that we have something that looks like this. And I noticed that this banana slice kind of comes in front and center here, and this could be a good opportunity to create some kind of cross dissolve or mask transition. So I'm actually going to create another keyframe right here by scaling this up and moving it over so that it is covering the frame entirely. I'm actually going to trim up the excess on these three clips now because we don't need them. Next thing we need to do is create a mask. So I'm going to skip ahead here a few frames to the point where we can kind of see the formation that these bananas are taking on. And I'm going to go to my effects and grab that draw mask tool once again, dragging it onto our clip, and I'm just going to start drawing pretty roughly around the shape of the bananas. It doesn't have to be anything too perfect, and we just want to make sure that we're more or less getting that outline pretty consistent with the formation that these slices are taking on. But I feel like this right here should be pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and disable the outline so we can see what we're working with, and I'm just going to feather inwards towards those banana slices to kind of soften up that edge. I'm liking how this is looking, so I'm going to add keyframes to both my transforms as well as my control points. I'm going to skip ahead a couple frames and adjust. Nice and easy, just making sure we're catching all those curves. Skip ahead another couple of frames and continue the same thing. And we're just going to skip ahead one more frame, and you can see at this point we barely have any bag left in the shot, so I'm just going to grab these remaining control points and pull them all the way out of the frame. And now we're going to do the same thing going in the opposite direction. As the bananas get smaller, we of course need to make the mask smaller as well. And once we finished our masking, we get something that looks like this. And now all of the hardest parts are out of the way. We can begin color matching and adding motion blur to really blend this all together. So first things first, I'm going to add a color grade to this initial clip by hitting Command 6. I'll add a bunch of saturation, go into our exposure and bring down the shadows, hit Command 7 to bring up my scopes so I can see how bright everything is. I can bump up the highlights a whole bunch, keep them under 100, go into my hue and saturation curves here, and I'm going to adjust the hue of the background. Can probably bring down the saturation of the background a tiny bit. Can also fix the hue, as this is looking a little bit too green and I want it to be more blue like that. And this is looking overall pretty good, so I can go ahead and select the clip, hit Command C, highlight our two bag clips here as well as our background clip, go up to Edit and hit Paste Attributes, making sure that we're only selecting the color board and the hue and saturation curves, and hit paste. Now I actually haven't even done anything yet to the colors of the flying banana shot, but you can see how much of a difference this has already made. Speaking of which, I'll go ahead and select the flying bananas shot and hit Command 6, and I'm gonna add some saturation, bring down the shadows a little bit, and once again in our hue and saturation curves, we can go down here and under hue versus sat, I'll grab the dropper tool and select this yellow right here, and we can add some saturation trying to match it to the background a little bit more. And that right there is looking pretty well blended. If we play this back, this is what we have. So all there is left to do is go into here and grab some motion blur. As always, I use the motion blur pack for Final Cut from Ryan Nangle, and I'm just gonna drag that on top of everything. And we're gonna click through, and as soon as the bag is no longer in the shot, that is where we can cut our motion blur and delete the rest. And that, my friends, is finally it for this transition. If you're feeling adventurous, you could throw in some sound effects and spice it up, but what you're left with is a final transition that looks like this. Don't forget, if you would like to try this for yourself with this exact footage, you can go to the link in the description below and download the clips right from Storyblocks off of my collection. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it or found it helpful. If you did, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Instagram at daniel.schiffer, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video.